Hey, what is up, Headhunters, executive recruiter, search firm owners, and all around beautiful, beautiful people. I love you all. This is David Stephen Patterson. You may know me as DSP. And along with my beautiful co-hosts, we have Neil Lebovitz over here. Right down there, we have the one and only, the beautiful one on the show, Chris Russell. And this is Headhunters Live. How you guys doing?
Good. Hey, Neil, I just checked. We're live in our group, so
Most
good
excellent.
there.
Excellent. Well,
Doing
today
great.
we're going to be talking about old school prospecting. But before we get into that, though, we're going to make sure that you guys can hear us. You guys that we are actually live. So we are right now streaming live on my YouTube channel. We have we're on LinkedIn. We're in the HERC Facebook group. We're also in the Independent Recruiters and Staffing. I always mess with the name. Independent Recruiters and staffing
agencies,
professionals
headhunters.
and headhunters. So Ursa.
We got to work on that. We got to tighten that up. Yeah.
10 viewers. Literally,
Well, I love the Ursa name because Ursa's a cool
are going
name.
to be impacted, David.
What'd you say there, Neil?
Literally, tens of viewers that are following us on all these channels are going to be bombarded with great content.
Is that counting us? Do I get to 10 counting us, or how's that?
That'll put us in maybe.
Well, if anything is actually, I started doing the counts here. If you look at all the different platforms, I think we're up on we're 700, I think so far.
Oh, good.
In terms of like watching, yeah. So we're steadily climbing. And now I will say though, for those folks who are watching though, and this actually would help us even get more viewers and get more views. If you guys can hear us, comment live in the comments, and we'll answer any questions you have. So comment them as well, and show us some emotion. Hit love, hit like, hit the angry button. Show some emotion, because it is that emotion that drives the algorithm, and we are all slaves to the algorithm, as you all know. So anyway, that said, we're going to be talking about old school prospecting. We're actually old school versus new school prospecting today. Last week we talked about getting sales meetings, and somebody just commented, give me the lowdown on Nate 3 times a grand. Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. We'll cover that. Why not? That is a good topic. We have a rogues gallery in the HERC. We'll talk about that later. But thank you, Gail. All right. So that said, guys, Neil.
Yes, sir.
Where are you at, man? You're supposed to be in New York with that beautiful skyline of yours.
I am in basically Del Boca Vista of New Jersey at my parents' retirement village. And I'm spending the day with them, getting to enjoy. They're part of the audience, but we actually have 2 more viewers. Hi, Mom and Dad.
That is awesome.
Right, I'm not Manhattan. Thank you for noticing.
Well, I will say that when I posted today the show announcement that we're talking about old school prospecting versus new school prospecting, and I mentioned in there, you look at old school recruiters, the ones that drink the coffee black, the ones that know what a pojo means, the ones that used to that consider emailing their resumes to be weak. And we were having a discussion, and I was curious to talk about pojo. Pojo is a bit of a old school term, and granted, it's kind of an MRI term, but so many recruiters start with MRI, and a lot of recruiters do know what a pojo is. What's a pojo? Anybody? You guys know what a pojo is?
Presentation on existing job order.
That's it. Damn, you got it.
So it's interesting too about all the MRI terms is like, not only you didn't even have to work for MRI. Like if you started recruiting in the last 20 years, or probably 10 to 20 plus years ago, like you probably worked for someone who did. So like terms like NPC, and there's a few other acronyms out there, I feel like they got worked into the vernacular of a lot of recruiters because that was what their bosses learned or whatever.
Trainer, as you
know. That's it is. And pojo. So I remember I never liked the term pojo because it was kind of weird. You have NPC that comes to the old MRI network. But it is a good test. Pojo. It's one of those terms that it's never quite died, but it's also one of those terms that was really big when Tony Byrne was a trainer, and the Steve Finkel book was a breakthrough. When that old book was when that first came out. Remember that? Was it 2.5 decades ago? Long time ago. God, we got a lot of great comments. By the way, Eleanor Euler, here's something funny. Eleanor Euler just commented, hi, Dave. Eleanor, I started staffing at a day labor place years and years ago. And then I worked for Kelly Services for a couple of years in Tucson. I was having a call center, and Eleanor Euler actually hired me for that role back in 1990, 98, something like that. Long time ago. Anyway, good to see you, Eleanor. Yeah.
Look at you.
Yeah, like that.
Now you're all on TV and stuff.
I know. I'm very famous in an extremely niche market. Extremely niche. I'm famous to tens of people. All right, let's talk about. All right, hey, but before we get into it, Neil, can you check your levels because it's hard to when you speak, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, with my microphone, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? You
it's a
should,
little on the low
DSP,
side.
there's a question. We should elaborate not just on what it stands for, but what does it actually mean?
Oh, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Let
Let me hide these here. There we go. So we see your beautiful face there. Yeah, so presentation existing job alert. But I've
David,
got
is this any better or is it too loud?
somebody. But I've got
an echo though.
It does have an echo?
You hear that?
Okay.
Yeah.
How about that?
So-
echo cancellation. Is that any better?
Echo. Well,
Echo,
we'll go with it. We'll see. Hopefully it'll work. So presentation on existing job order. So the way it was taught to me basically was it's a recruiting call in essence, right? You're actually presenting the job order to a candidate, right? You're pitching the job. At least that's the way I was taught. That's a POJO. And so basically the old school days, when I started, they had this like system that basically tracked your phone time. And so the golden rule always was at least 4 hours of phone time every day. And that means it's basically every minute that you're actually talking on the phone. If you do 4 hours, that's the golden rule. If you did 4 hours and then you'd have then you may have to do say, I don't know, 30 POJOs in one day and 30 marketing calls in one day or something like that. And you always market in the morning. You'd always recruit in the afternoon because the theory was you would, if you recruit in the afternoon, because we're cold calling people at work, you want to catch them when they're frustrated on their job, is usually in the afternoon because they're kind of like done with all the BS at their workplace, and so you call them when they're frustrated. That was the theory.
Plus, you could also hopefully be talking to someone in the afternoon about a job order you got that morning. So I think it's
very, very true. And in fact, and I think it's a good place to start is to start with some of those old school tactics because. I think that there's lots of obviously things have changed. Back then we didn't have LinkedIn. Back then, emailing wasn't really a big thing. We used to actually fax resumes, if you were to believe it. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And I want to talk about a bit about some of some like these new school techniques that we can actually incorporate in. But that said, I'm curious. So I talked about POJO, kind of what it was like when I first started. What about you, Chris? When you first started, like what were some of the old school techniques that you were taught that you think are maybe extinct now?
Reference calls were big.
Mm-hmm.
So basically any references that you got from job orders, from candidates rather, whether they were candidates that you had for an active job order or you would reach out to candidates and they would basically, the context was, hey, I hire for these types of roles. If I have something come up, I want to know about you, blah, 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 blah. And part of that process was, you'd ask them for a few references, and now you don't really do that as much because people would be a little closer to the chest on that kind of thing. But for a long time, people just volunteered those readily, 3, 5, 6 references. Mm-hmm. And you wanted manager references because the thought process is that you or your boss or whoever would call those references and try to do what you're very familiar with, like the flip calls, if you will, which I'll let you elaborate on because I know you've done a lot on that space. But reference calls were a big place to start recruiters because they're like, okay, you're calling candidates all day initially, and you're trying to turn some of that into job orders. References were a source. And also you would look up candidates. Like this is early days like Monster where you could get online and see some resumes, and you would look at people that worked at places where they mentioned they went through a staffing firm because sometimes they did. And then you would call those people. And as part of the course of your conversation, you would try to make sure that one of those references was at that company because the likelihood that you could turn that into a customer was even greater. So stuff like that was a big one.
And that's a big one, actually, because I really think anybody can incorporate that into practice right now. I think referral calls, that is a timeless technique. And
not referrals, but references.
A reference, reference call. Yep. It's a timeless technique, and you could demonstrate. It's one thing to tell a prospective client, I recruit the best people. My process is this, and that, and I do all.
They're living part of your process.
Versus making them part of your process and actually demonstrating what you're doing. You're giving them basically a free sample of your work, basically. What about you, Neil? Back in your days, back when they used to make phone calls on a rock.
What you're both saying, So, but really, if you look at it, the way I always taught it, going back to the old days, look at like a infinity symbol, a figure 8 on the bottom with 5 prongs underneath. And the way I was taught is each side of that eight's exactly the same process, same everything you need to do. Client side and candidate side, okay? And they're identical. And they're figure 8 and they're all related. And they often switch from one side to the other, I was taught, okay? You're going to have your clients going to move over to the other. They're going to become a candidate. Then they could become a client, depending upon the hat. Sometimes they can be the same person at the same time. And that's how I was trained very early on, the figure 8. And then the 5 prongs are saying, now that you know this, and this was drilled in, I don't know if I could come up with anything other than this to answer the question, is what are those 5 prongs? Anyone that ever worked at Agilon, Accountants on Call, My World, is going to know this inside out, because I didn't come up with it myself, but we were all eat and breathe and slept this. It's, you have to go into every call with all of the prongs, and you preface it with the tool I was taught. Oh, by the way, make sure you hit all 5 areas. Every call is how I was taught. Not so, every call is to get a job order or a job order lead. Every call is to get a candidate or candidate lead, and to gather information about the marketplace. That's the 5th prong. 2 sides, 2 prongs on each side, and then you package them all together, gathering info, and that's it. Oh, by the way, so to your point, that's a flip reference check, where Chris said David could talk about it. To his point, go in on a reference check. Why would you not go in where it's easier? But always know that's one way to do it. But if you go in on a reference check, then as long as you follow the 5 prongs, I'm going to try to get a job order on that, or a lead of going in the company. Hey,
or a candidate, or
right. And hey, who else? Candidate names. Hey, who's good? Who else? And always do that. And then again, that's the plan. So that
was a brilliant way, a simple way. I know you said it's not much, but there's so much you could take out of that. And it's basically, you're kind of like using all the parts of the buffalo, right? Like you're using, like you're extracting the maximum value from that phone call, whatever it might be. It might be a job lead. It might be a referral. It might be a candidate. There goes my face. I got covered up.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but that was, you're basically like, listen, that was
reading comments here. There we go.
Yeah.
This might be easier.
Especially when you were spending most of your time on the phone, like your goal, to Neil's point, was to make sure that you are getting the most out of every phone call, whatever that might be. And that's an excellent guide to basically keep you focused on getting something of value out of that call.
Right. Because I was taught, David and Chris, every phone call was an opportunity, and your only opportunity, to build your desk, to gather information, your expertise.
That's all you had.
Intel. And when you become automated in today's world, you lose all that. So you talk about going old school. You have to. I mean, you had both, right? But anyway, so yeah, Chris, I like how you put that on.
Well, you know, the way I look at it, and by the way, this layout might be a little bit better, because that way we can do these little comments at the bottom to actually covering Chris's beautiful face, because I think Chris accounts for probably a good 80% of our views. Because anyway,
Chris, you are handsome.
Oh, thank you.
You know, you also look like that. What's that actor's name? Who do you get? Chris Pine? Who else? You look like a
I take that. I mean, I'm a big fan. So
who do you get? You look like him, I think. Who do you get?
I got some of that.
I mean, for me, it's Ryan Gosling every time.
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, totally. Ryan Gosling.
I don't know.
Usually the abs part. That's where I.
How do you not know? I got John Lovitz growing up. I get Howie Mandel.
That's growing up. You got John Lovitz.
Yeah. Howie Mandel. I get all.
Oh, Howie Mandel, big time. Especially like the second generation Howie Mandel.
Dr. Evil.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
When I was thinner, and before I had the beard, it was Steve Carell. I got that occasionally.
Oh.
Steve Carell.
I can see that without the beard. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. When I was thinner without the beard, I was Steve Carell. I looked like a lot like him. I got that, and I got Steve Young little once in a while. The old quarterback, yeah. But all right, so with that said, let's talk about some other old school techniques. So in addition to the references, now this is I got this from I forget who did this. I had a friend of mine who used this technique on his references, and I forget exactly his exact wording, but his whole thing was he wanted to make sure that he got every opportunity in the world, or every opportunity that came up to actually try to get new business. He took it. Right? He was a consummate salesperson, but he always had a rule, was that you never wanted to pull a bait and switch, or what seemed like a bait and switch to the to the prospect. So, for example, calling to do a reference, you get them on the phone, and then it's the, oh, hey, by the way, do you happen to use your recruiters there sort of shtick? And he saw that as being disingenuous, or just the appearance of being disingenuous. So what he would always do was he would actually, it was after the call that he would then a couple of days later email back, call back, leave a voicemail, ask for another quick meeting for a few minutes. He had a few more questions to ask. He wouldn't say what the questions were, right? But then they get back on the line and they say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I meant to mention this in our last conversation, but I didn't. I apologize, but I want to ask." And then he would go into more like a sales conversation, but he tried to separate it. He tried to separate out the reference call from the sales call because he didn't want to seem as if he was doing a bait and switch. Right?
I've done some of that. And when I had a few recruiters working for me, I would have that kind of two-pronged where the recruiter they weren't really they weren't full desk. They were just executing on stuff I brought in, and they would do that first part. And then they would just leave at the end of it, essentially, do you mind if we reach out if we have any additional questions? And of course, everyone always says yes. And then I'd look through all the notes they had and decide which ones I wanted to follow up with. And I would kind of follow a similar cadence. The advantage of that is like next week when we talk about like hiring a team, that was one way that I was able to have another team member do part of that and then have me pick it up from there.
All right. So let me ask you this. So beyond that, so you talked about obviously cold calling. We've talked about that quite a bit in terms of making like reference calls, and we talked about the flip call, which we can talk about. Let's talk about cold calls. So one thing that for me, starting out with MRI. Oh, by the way, real quick, Rob Ebel, also another old buddy of mine from back in the day, says when we started with MRI, he still used fax machines to get resumes and send out agreements. I remember, in fact, there was training out there where trainers would basically tell you that that basically you would call the hiring authority and you would get the interview confirmation before you send the resume. That was like a rule. Do not send the resume by fax, email, or in any
get
way.
Interview slots. Get interview slots. Yeah.
No, but even in the interview slots, it was also even just get the interview, like talk, basically sell the candidate to the client. And when they ask for the resume, say, great, I could do that. But first, let's set up a time to actually have you talk to the candidate. So it was of course, nowadays it's not really, I don't think it's really feasible to do that nowadays. But I do remember that was like a big thing when I was in training.
The MRI story really fast. So obviously I had faxes. I had the thermal fax, which was the wax thing before plain paper. But before that, I was in the industry before fax machines came out with Robert Half in New York City. And what we had to do was use a messenger service in New York City. Guys on bicycles, you would bring it up to your front admin. It was a regular thing. You'd get your resumes, you'd package them up. They'd come in, they'd order them, they'd pay their $50. And that was the norm. That was the MO with messengers in and out of your lobby. Wild, right? Totally crazy.
That is crazy. That you are really old, man.
He probably had hot books, like the binders with the, and went sat down, did database calls out of a file drawer.
Uphill with a pound of ice on my shoulders, I tell you.
Do you have to hire the cart first or the horse? How does that work?
Well, and that's one of those old school techniques. I will say this test goes back to the reference calls and even let's say flip calls. It's a good mentality to have for every recruiter is that every candidate is a potential client. Even if they're an individual contributor, they're going to be a manager at some point if they're any good, most likely. So every candidate could be a potential client either now or in the future. And every client is a potential candidate either now or in the future. And so so back in the day, I remember we'd have this list of goals for every call. So as you mentioned, Neil, I think every call you were saying get a job order or do this or get a resume or whatever. And that was it. In fact, I remember when I first started my firm and I was really pushing the cold call thing with my guys. And we had this deal where if they didn't accomplish one of those things, or at least try to accomplish one of the things in a phone call, we would make them call back and apologize for not trying to get their business. Have somebody do that a couple times and they'll make sure they try to get everybody's business every single time. Because that's an embarrassing call to make. But it's a little game you can play with your staff. At least that's what I did back in the day, is to force your people to, on every single call, like try to move the ball forward, whether it's get a resume or trying to get their business or whatever it happens to be, but always moving the ball forward no matter what.
And you can do that with a live conversation. And that's a limiting factor with if you just strictly do it all through like LinkedIn Messenger or whatever, because it ends up being a very one-dimensional conversation, and it's hard to pivot to those other dimensions of the conversation, the other possible like goals that you could have, like Neil was talking about. Now, I mean, you might have to message somebody on LinkedIn or whatever to get that conversation going, but that's like some people I would hear from saying, oh, listen, you can do the whole thing pretty much over like Messenger and email. You barely need to talk to it. And you can to some extent, I think, but you don't extract as much value and get as much market intelligence and hear enough opportunity if you don't have a live conversation, a video call, a phone call. So I just think that the construct itself lends itself to getting all those variables covered.
I'll tell you what, actually, nowadays, beyond just the phone, I think the fact that we could do Zoom calls. I mean,
Zoom would be the same thing.
I wish I had Zoom back in the day, because, look, you can build so many great relationships being face to face. And granted, you're not really technically face to face, but you're a lot more face to face.
It's still live conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at the body language.
Old school on you, and something, David, you talked about a couple of weeks ago, and it fits in with the old school, which is what we're talking
drop-ins. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's great. The drop-ins. Oh my God, no. The UPS overnight FedEx letter, snail mail. Oh my God, get back to it for your key targets. They will every. I'm just saying, the time you need it. Like I was forced to do, I forced my people to do it. Like I'm saying, you're not going to strike out on this job. And we found out there was a job order through one of our competitors, and there's interviews going on. In order to sign off on that, you had to come up with you had to show me the FedEx that went out to them with your pitch and the resume and your whole handwritten letter to them. Okay.
That'd work really well right now. That would stand out.
It will work now. Everyone opens up UPS. Everyone, I don't care how busy, I will open up any UPS or FedEx that comes to me every time still today. Anyone doesn't? Anyone?
Yeah.
And it's going to be a handwritten note. It worked all the time. I'll tell you stories and stories of training in my boot camps on that principle. Okay. That's one that I should have brought out maybe first, even before the other stuff. I don't know.
Well, that's a great segue into new school, because I really think, and obviously we talk about I think new school techniques. Some of those people know them, but it's that combination of old school and new school where I think where things really shine. Because as I mean, if everybody's that emailing, mass emailing, okay, then start making cold calls, right? Start sending out direct mail, because do the things that other people aren't doing. And so many people nowadays aren't making phone calls. I mean, look at either my Facebook group or your Facebook group, Neil. And what do we see sometimes? We see people asking questions like, is it okay to recruit candidates at their work? Or to email their work email addresses? And back in the day, 20 years ago, that wouldn't even been a question. If you were to ask that question, you'd be laughed out of the room, right? By veteran recruiters. Nowadays, it's kind of like a common thing. And so I think that so many recruiters nowadays have this mentality of just kind of like set it and forget it, right? Just push a button, send out 300 or 400 messages over the course of a week or however many days.
Strictly a volume play, yeah.
It's strictly a volume play. And so, look, at the end of the day, I do realize that people aren't picking up, right? I remember when I was back in my old firm, back when making cold calls was our primary game, we were only getting maybe a 3 to 5% pickup rate, like at best. It's probably worse today. So obviously I know that you can't just make phone calls. So let's talk about maybe combining some of these new school and old school techniques, right?
Yeah.
Now, so for me,
I just want to say as a preface, because this is a whole concept to add this when you're doing it with your new school. Mm-hmm. There's a concept that I just want to, this is a big part of my training when I was giving boot camps. It's called Rolodex syndrome, really old term. But if you picture a big old Rolodex, which was finite, right? But it would have 200, 400,000 cards on it. There was no ownership or accountability for it. Tony Robbins really coined this whole thing. There's no accountability for it. And it became a numbers play as opposed to just focus on 3 of those Rolodex cards. That's it. 3, ignore all the others and make it happen. So I just want to say, if you take that concept, now take what Chris just said with the volume play, and you, David, what you're now looking at is the internet and LinkedIn. And you're now looking at a Rolodex that is virtual and infinite. And now, if you are a victim, like most people are, your job is to make them real. They're not just numbers that you can automate. What do you bring to the top and make something happen with? And do all these things we're talking about. And Tony Robbins will tell you, my big thing, focus on 3. Stop the mass prospecting. Do it. Do the low-hanging fruit. Send it out. But where's the sales now? Get back to the sales. 3. Okay, keep going. Because you're right.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I think there's also something to said about doing volume play and doing a let's say a low volume but quality play. So one of the things I teach my clients oftentimes is to separate your prospects in terms of tiers. And you're going to have your tier 1s, your hot ones, right? Whether they're active leads, they're actively hiring, or maybe they're higher level, or whatever your parameters are. But then you also have probably hundreds or thousands of other people in your market that you want to be in front of, but you don't necessarily want to put a lot of calories into. So you can still do like mass emailing and all those things, right, to your market as a whole. And then maybe your top 10%, you put 80% of your effort into, but you're not going to ignore the other 20% as well, right? Because those other ones can become your top 20% as well over time. And so it's really is both. But the one thing I want to get to in terms of old school versus new school is making cold calls on your outbound messaging sequences, right? Because the way I look at it, one of the things that I think people have this mentality of, and a lot of old school people have this mentality too, is that if people that emailing and just LinkedIn isn't working, you got to cold call. If you really want to make a lot of money in this business, you have to cold call. And then new school people say, well, yeah, but nobody picks up, right? Everybody's using email, everybody's using LinkedIn. If I'm not using that, I'm hobbling myself. And so the way I look at it is when you get on the phone with a prospect or a sales meeting, it's usually through the result of several different messaging or messages over time. It's very rare when you happen to reach out to somebody and they say, oh yeah, I need a recruiter. I don't know any other recruiters. You're the first recruiter I've ever talked to. Sure, here's my business. It's really rare. Everybody uses recruiters. Everybody knows the value of using a recruiter. They've all used other recruiters. They have a dozen recruiters in their inbox right now. Yeah. So when you email, what are the odds of it working right off the bat? It does, but it's rare. So it's repeated over time. So that over time, they get a couple LinkedIn messages from you, email message here and there. Here's a voicemail. Here's a live call over here. Reference call over here. They see a piece of content over here. Here's another email message over here. LinkedIn message over here. And so it's just a part of your messaging strategy. But how I like to use cold calls in terms of messaging, and very, very simply, send a LinkedIn message, send an email. Immediately after the email, call. And you're going to get a voicemail, and the voicemail will say, hey, Bob, I just sent you an email and I just sent you a LinkedIn message, right? And in the email message that you send, I'm going to be calling here shortly. Like you reference every other message in your messaging, right? In your voicemail message in the email, and the email message in the voicemail.
Your boot camp, not to plug you, but I remember you did something like this in one of your programs. It was like a full blueprint of exactly that. And I asked actually if I could steal it for a presentation I had. I borrowed it for a training I did.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
And it's exactly that. It has to be, it's back to the sales element of your different touches. And it's really, you do it. It's okay. Yeah.
And a quick observation on that too, I think that's really valuable is you get like a lot, I think I'll see people who they're just all about LinkedIn message sequences, or they're all about email sequences. And I think they get fundamentally the need for like repetition and the fact that they're not going to have a need right this minute. So you want to keep popping up the radar. But I think a nuance that is missed is what you were just talking about, which is mixing up the different mediums too, because part of it is timing. The other part of it is not different platforms work for different people. You know, you could be doing the best LinkedIn sequence ever, and if that person doesn't check LinkedIn that much, then, so that's different angles.
And if someone comes at you from 2 angles, it totally makes them stand out. Think about all the in-mails. Like if someone's going to in-mail me and I might read it and delete it, then they come on Facebook, I'm going to feel much more of that reciprocity mental. I'm going to much more. So to that point, even on steroids, to your point.
Mm-hmm. Well, now here's one thing. So for you guys who want some actual like real, like, okay, what's a real tip? Like what's something I can use today? I'm going to talk to you about a voicemail called the frictionless voicemail. I didn't invent it, but I learned it and I've modified it.
Friction voicemail? That was yours. The friction voicemail.
Mine was the friction. The friction.
This is the lubricated version.
This is the friction
lubricated version. We call that the Astro voice.
He called it the lube call, but then he felt like he needed to change it. Marketing.
That's right. It's a family show, fellas.
Yeah. Bring up
But
Lose with David on Thursday.
yeah, so the problem with voicemail. So everybody, well, for the most part, nobody picks up, right? So you leave this voicemail, and the voicemail typically sounds like this. Hi, Bob. This is David Patterson with the Kinetic Group. I'm calling because, or whatever, or this message is for Bob Jenkins. This is David Patterson with the blah, 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 blah. And of course, that sounds like a sales call. And I don't know about you guys, but when I listen to a voicemail, that's the first thing I hear. I'm usually hitting delete. So I got 15 other voicemails I got to go through, and I don't want to listen to a freaking pitch. I don't want to be sold, even if it's something I may need. I'm not interested in taking the time. And so there's a lot of friction there, right? And in addition, if they do happen to listen to the message, you're asking them to call you back. And no one calls people back nowadays. They usually would rather email or LinkedIn because there's less friction there, right? So when you say, give me a call back at blank, they're probably not going to listen to it anyway. And if they do, they're not going to call you back. So
good point.
So
good
if you
actually.
yeah, so we send an email. See, here's the trick. And Neil, and I'm sure I know you taught pattern interrupts before. This is a pattern interrupt. When you start your voicemail with, instead of saying, this message is for Bob Jenkins, this is David Patterson, my full name with my company name, right? So obviously it's a sales call. Make it sound personal. So the pattern interrupt is no last names, no company names. Hey, Bob, David here. Sorry I missed you. Look, don't worry about calling me back. I just emailed you an hour ago, whatever time. I just emailed you about, and then you pitch there. And at the end, you simply say, if this resonates with you, or if this, or what have you, if you want to have a conversation, reply back to my email. I just sent it to you about an hour ago. Here's the subject line. Reply back. Let's set up a time. Or hey, feel free to give me a call back as well, and then you'll leave your number. But what you're doing is you're removing friction. For one, you're making it sticky because they hear, hey, Bob, David here. Sorry I missed you. The first thing they think is, which David is this? Do I know David? I'm going to listen to the rest of this voicemail so I see who this is. You're trying to hook them into listen to it, right? So it's all simple. Hey, Bob, this is David. Sorry I missed you. Don't worry about calling me back. I just emailed you. And then go into your thing. Now they're already listening to you, right? Now they may or may not be interested in what you have to say, but at least you get them to listen to what you have to say.
And you give them an easy way to respond in whatever medium is.
I love the easy way to respond because I would totally action that myself. And if you automate the two. In fact, we've automated where we're doing just that now. And David's working on something where we're doing the text right afterwards of just to have the quick links. So make it really easy for them to set up an appointment or whatever it is.
And that prospect that doesn't want to be sold, like, is going to write you back by email. Because I would do that. I hate getting stuck on the phone. But like, if you sent me that message, if I was mildly interested, I would reply back to the email. Because at least I feel like I have a little bit of control over the flow. Sorry to cut you off, Neil.
No,
you're exactly right.
You know what, David, I love that. I'm going to tell you, I've used the same technique and taught it my whole life. And on kudos to Peter Lefkowitz and the Morgan method. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it was. I would never change it. I love David's. If I would learn David's, I would. It's the same idea. This one's a little different. This is the cryptic voicemail message. And it's disarming too. And this is it. And he made it as part of it. If you get him on the call as part of your opening recruiting call, and it was a voicemail, it was, hey, Chris. This is same deal. Hey, Chris, this is Neil. You and I haven't spoken before, but I was speaking with someone who thought we should talk. Give me a call. That's it. That's it. And you never have to veer from it. No ruse. There's no lie. That's it. Now, why does it work? Why do I like it? It's disarming. It's Neil. It's his first name. It's not formal. You don't know who I am. I'm not giving you the pitch. You're not going to hang out as a recruiter. It's this and that. I'm not saying any ruse yet. I was speaking to someone who thought we should. Oh, I'm not lying. Yeah, someone thought we should talk because you're the hiring manager, because you're interviewing or whatever it is. And here's the thing that happens. You've all gotten calls like that, and they really bother me when I get them because I'm like, darn, I wish they gave me a little more. Do I know them? Do I not know them? Is it a sales call? Is it not? You know those? Hey, Chris, it's so-and-so. I need to follow up with you. About what? And I might write back. Could you regarding what? Or at least I'm in dialogue. But the point is, I think Lefkowitz nailed it from a lot of elements you talked about. And again, that's so old, but I've never changed it for any voicemail because people don't know why you're calling. And did they do something wrong? Did you see them do something? Did they do something in the office? Are they having an affair? I don't know. Do you have money for why is this guy calling me? And you're going to disarm them the second they call you. Hey, Chris, let me take some of the mystery out of my call. That was Lefkowitz's. I never use that anymore, but I was just saying, hey, let me take some of the mystery out of the call. The reason I called you is because this person, Steve, referred me to, said you're the best person, whatever. But I loved not the Lefkowitz whole script there. I never kept that whole thing, but I do love what he did there. To this day, he trains it, right? To this day.
Well, let's talk
human nature hasn't changed, so these techniques work.
Changed. That's right. I would never change that today. Keep going. Sorry, David.
All right. Well, let's talk about the cold call. So what do they pick up live? Like, what are the dreaded? What are the worst things about cold calling? By the way,
do you have a minute? Can you talk right now? No, I'm just kidding. I hate that.
Or no. For me, it was I'll even voicemail, and then somebody picks up live. I'm like,
yeah.
And I get caught dumb. Like that happens because you're just so like just in the moment, leaving voicemails. But one thing that let's talk about voice cold call. Actually, if they hit pick up live, because that's a big one. Like they may actually pick up. They may pick up live. So what do you do when they pick up live? So I'll tell you the technique I like. This is from.
Just want to say what Chris just joked about first, which is right before that, which is when you're about to make the call. Don't do what Chris just joked about. It's the worst sales habit ever. You got a minute? Busy? Is this a good time? You failed.
And don't do it in recruiting calls either. Don't do it at all.
What are you doing? Why did you just say that?
They answered. Why are you apologizing?
Yeah, and what comes from that other than bad? What are you doing? Okay, David. Now that
that's why I had to chime in with that.
I know you did, but I don't want to gloss over that. Yeah. Okay, David. Now go. Now that you got him, go ahead.
So here's what I like to do. This is a Sandler technique. So this isn't, again, this not me, but this is from the Sandler sales system. I've always been a big fan of it. And I like the way they always try to lead with pain. And so this is the one I like a lot.
Sandler, get it?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
He's doing a bad Adam Sandler.
By the way, never his Holy Trinity, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Waterboy. If you like Adam Sandler, Waterboy, Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison.
I gotta tell you, Waterboy, highly underrated film.
Great movie.
Yeah.
In fact, in my opinion, the best of the three. It's Waterboy, Happy Gilmore, then Billy Madison.
I wanted to not like that movie. It's so stupid. It's just funny.
It's funny.
Okay.
So all right. So cold call. So I think that one of the things that what I found is that a person that has a natural gravity to them, right? People that are like, they're naturally people person. They don't need techniques like this. They can go and you say, hey, this is Bob Jenkins, this is David Patterson with XYZ. And they have such a presence about them. They can get the person to stick with them during the pitch. What I found for most people is that just like on the voicemail, hey, this is Bob Jackson. Hey, this is David Patterson, the Canada Group. Yeah, I'm calling because, or do you have a minute or whatever you happen to say? You're letting on that it's a sales call, and you're letting them know that that they need to get off the phone with you as fast as humanly possible. So I like the pattern interrupt, right? I learned this from Sandler, and it's something like this. The one I like to use is when they answer, hey, Bob, David here. Again, no last names, no company names. Hey, Bob, David here. And I just say right off the bat, this is a cold call. And I just let it hang there for a second because it's such a like out of left field. And then simply say, tell you what, can you give me 30 seconds? I'll tell you exactly why I'm calling. And then you could tell me if it makes sense to continue. Is that fair? And they almost always say yes.
That's the upfront agenda, right?
It's the upfront agenda. And it's very much, and you can say, hey, Bob, David here. I've got something very specific I want to talk to you about. Can you give me 30 seconds? And it's just huge mystery. I like the cold call one personally because it's radically honest, and oftentimes they kind of laugh a little bit. And again, they almost always give you the 30 seconds. Granted, your pitch would be a little bit longer than that. No one's going to time you. If they say no, no. So we say, great, no problem. I can call you back. Let me tell you why I'm calling, and then you can tell me if I should even call back at all. So you can still do the exact same thing. What it does is
the disarming concept. It's disarming. So much training, that concept, right? You see that idea and so many of the most famous trainers. I love that. Yeah, right.
You're just acknowledging the obvious, the unspoken obvious. You're like, oh, you just called a CEO. No shit, it's a cold call. Right.
Well, like, what'll happen is they'll let you go. They'll let you talk. They'll almost all the time they'll agree because they want to hear what this is, or they're taken aback a little bit, or they'll say, "What's this regarding?" That's a yes, by the way. then go do your thing, and then simply say, great. Oh, by the way, this is David Patterson with blah 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 company, and then do your pitch for whatever your pitch happens, whether you're recruiting, you're marketing, you're pitching a candidate, whatever it is. And what happens is they get disarmed. You're being very honest, and people like the
honest
honesty.
that you're making a sales call, right? But people are
Mhm.
afraid to say that, even though everyone knows. They're scared to do it because
And
they know
if-
the person knows them. Why not say it? It's
Right.
just before I lose the thought.
Yeah.
It was trained when you got a lead, you call and you disarm them. You go, hey, listen, I'm calling you dead on, hit them right in the eye. Hey, I'm calling you because I got this lead. Listen, this is a sales call, and I know you get a million. I'm the last person you want to talk to, however, and you go in. It's all hit them. I love it. Disarm, tell them the truth. You got 30 seconds. Like, what are they gonna like? You're hitting. I know what this is what I'm doing. I love that, David.
And it's also especially effective if you're talking to someone who actually is a decision maker, owner, salesperson themselves, et cetera. Like if you're talking about the owner of like a small, medium-sized business or something like that, or even a larger business, like they're in business, they sell things, they understand that like this is like we're all doing business here. Like this is not unusual.
Well,
if you talk to someone who's like a mid-level bureaucrat, they might be like, I don't know.
We're all the same. It's just like when recruiters get upset in the groups about all the cold calls I'm getting from these people. I'm like, you get the same reaction from everyone about recruiters. How are you bitching about these guys mass LinkedIning you? Are you kidding me? That's always my reaction when I see that written. And it's the same thing. We're all the same, right? There are people, when you disarm them, to David's saying, that's why that works so well. Sandler nailed it in a nice, simple way. How would you, like, if again, try techniques. Like, I love when I would learn stuff like that when I was a rookie, right, David? Because it just, and it's exactly, I like that they call it the decide is. It just,
well, and also the thing about cold calls is it makes cold calls fun, because cold calls can be a drag. Let's be real. Like they can suck. So why people don't like to do them, but we make it fun.
Times Gray said it's the most fun he has.
Yeah, Nate 2 times, Nate 3 times, whatever the case may be. By the way, for those of you folks who want to know what we're talking about, in the Herc, I don't know about the Ursa, but in the Herc we have our rogues gallery, and of group members who have made an impact. Let's put it that way. And Nate was one of those recruiters that made a very highly controversial impact in our group, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to.
People think that there's a couple people upset with me that I'm starting to pile with them, and I wasn't at all. He quit and left. He just didn't like any criticism, whatever. But the guy was such a troll. Whatever. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Something was off. Anywho, enough about
trying to get engagement. Well, I will say I did keep it in the Herc because I like the engagement. Because part of it is also I loved all the comments he was getting. It's entertaining.
What does 2 times mean anyway? Who puts it in the professional? Hi, I'm Nate 2 times Gray. I'm Neil 2.0. I don't know. It's weird.
Actually, I don't know. That's a good point. Eleanor, by the way, again, she hired me back in Kelly Service back in Tucson back in '97, I believe. So, yeah, thank you, Eleanor. Eleanor asked, "Do video messages work for you at all?" They do. So video. So here's how I like to use video messaging. Again, this is just what I happen to teach. I'm sure other people have different techniques. A couple different ways you can do it. Obviously, if it's a part of your overall messaging strategy, meaning if you're sending out, say, a LinkedIn message, email message, phone call, yeah, do a video as well. How you do a video, a couple different ways you can do it. I use a system called Dub. There's also Vidyard, Loom, any of those screen recording software. One of the best ways to use video messaging is if you do it in LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will GIF the video message, right? And then screen share, have the person's LinkedIn profile. So you're reaching out to Bob Jenkins. He's the director of IT, yada, yada. His LinkedIn profile is in the background. Your face is in the corner, right? And so when you send that maybe minute long to 45-second long video introducing yourself, and you send it to him over LinkedIn, he's going to see the GIF with you in the corner and his LinkedIn profile in the background. Do you think he's going to click on it to see what is the person recruiting me? Is this what's, because it's about them. People are interested in themselves. So if you're going to use video messaging, I think it's great to use, but you got to get it open. One of the best ways to do it is just have a picture of them, basically their LinkedIn profile in the background with you in the corner. That'll get it open, and do the same.
Brilliant. If there's like one awesome takeaway from this, I haven't heard. That's smart.
Let me tell you, David does everything in video. Okay, if you message David as a friend and as a peer, David, when he messaged me, 9 out of 10 times it's gonna be a video of him sending to me, or it's gonna be an audio. It's almost never text from David. That's the truth. Okay,
I
it's
hate
like
to type.
well, it's not just that. If you're
Yeah.
multimedia with it and stuff, and now in my company because it's really important. But answer it this way: if someone's going to go out of their way and you see their face, and if they can speak well and they sound good and they have a good vibe, of course it's going to
Mhm.
help their cause. How rare? How many do you get? How many video messages are you getting? I get very few. When
Yeah, very few.
I get
That's
very
definitely underutilized, and that's another way to stand out. Like we're talking about ways
yeah.
to stand out from the
I
crowd.
react to them. If someone's going to do it, if
Mhm.
it's yeah.
Do it now before everyone's doing
Well,
it.
but I
and
don't
then you
know
have to
why
do
hasn't
something.
everyone been doing it? I thought it was going to be a thing years ago. So I'm saying, you know what? Because everyone's doing the easy automation of to your other point of the volume stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, David, that's a
It's
great
hard.
point.
It's hard. Yeah, and actually, you know what you can do is just have a be part of your normal outreach activity. So, for example, if you're reaching out to, I don't know, 200 prospects that week, for example, but you got 50, maybe 40 or 50, or even let's say 20, 25 or 30 that are really high value. They're high level, or they're get hot jobs, or they're active, or whatever happens to be. Do your normal messaging to, let's say, all 200 emails. Maybe your top 50, you might make cold calls to. Maybe your top 25, you might send out video messages to, right? I mean, obviously spend time where it makes sense. Or here's something else you could do. If you're sending out emails automated and using, like, say, an emailer like Upticks, which is what I use, I was Outplay, Woodpecker, any of those. If you're sending out any sort of, like, say, brochure, landing page, or anything like that, what you can do is you can actually have these systems lead score. And so let's say I send out 200 emails over the week, and I know that these 50 people actually open the email, and these, I just kind of a low open rate, but these 50 people clicked on the link, right? Then you can have those people put on a call list and call those folks, right? Or you can also have a system that says when someone opens an email and they click a link, to notify within 10 minutes to call, because they clicked the link, they're at their desk. Call them right then, like right when they open the email and they click the link. And there's systems out there that'll allow you to, that'll notify you as soon as they open it, as soon as they click the link.
And you know, speaking of
Call
the
'em right
video
there.
thing, it works so well. And
I'll
so
do the
it's
video.
one of the things I'm implementing next week for real. Timing's great on it.
Mhm.
Is like, for example, when you download, David, put on the staffing by the book thing. We do have this thing in there. It's our staffing by the book. You all do need to download it if you haven't. Everything with staffing. Right now, the video is not on there. When you get it, you'll get your email with the ebook and all the automation. One of the things that we're going to have next is going to be, it'll be assigned to the sales rep automatically. They'll have their individual video message right within HubSpot. We're not that starting next week. That's going to roll out. And it's just going to be, hey, and again, it'll look personal too. Instead of saying the name, hey, so it's going to be an automated video message. And of course, I'm going to do it because it's not going to hurt, of course. And my sales reps are beautiful and professional and engaging. And so I think that's a nice way to cap it all together. Like, I'm putting my money where David's mouth is. And that sounds, I don't
That
want
sounds weird. No, I don't want your money where my mouth is, 'cause I know where your
to.
money's been.
You know what, my mouth? Yeah. Okay. I knew that wasn't
It's
sounding
very
good.
unsavory places.
Yeah.
But well, actually, while we're doing that, and actually, if anybody wants to learn more about sort of my philosophy when it comes to sales and marketing, you can download my Lighthouse Method sales
That's
and
where
marketing
you
guide.
had the blueprint, right, David, that you shared with me, isn't it, in Lighthouse Method? The different call
Uh,
strategy of the different.
oh yeah, the call strategy. Yeah, the call. I've got scripts in there, templates, messaging sequences, scripts, and yada
Yeah.
yada.
Yeah. Really
Yeah,
good.
it's a meaty, very girthy, 220 pages. It's a big one, but anyway, yeah, it's free. Go there
I don't
and
want to put my
download
mouth where your girth is. That's better. How's that?
it.
Better,
Right.
worse, painfully accurate, whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some other. Okay. So what are some other, let's say, new school techniques beyond just the initial prospecting? So here's one that a lot of people don't think about, but I like to think of things like advertising or content as part, or content strategy as part of your prospecting campaign. So here's what I mean by this. So let's say, so the reason why people put up content on LinkedIn is because they want to be seen as an expert and authority. They want to stay in front of their prospects and yada yada, right? So that's why we post things about interview strategy or about recruitment predictions and trends and all that kind of crap. And of course, very few people actually read it because organically, this stuff doesn't really percolate into the rest of the market, or it does not distribute into the rest of the market unless it happens to go viral, which is really, really rare. So if you have content that you really want your prospects to see, where if you know that they see it on a continual basis, they're more likely to take your call, respond back to your email. Because again, they got 12 recruiters in their inbox today who they're going to respond to, if any. Probably the one they recognize, right? Or the one they see as being an actual real authority in the business. So here's a simple strategy. It's not simple, but it's definitely new school, and people are not doing this. If you've got, let's say, 500 prospects in your market that you want to reach out to that month, for example, or put into a campaign, take that same 500, and I talked about running ads, right? Take your best 10 pieces of content, put them on Facebook or whatever sort of social media platform they're likely on. And for most old people right now, it's Facebook. Let's be honest, right? They're not on Instagram. But upload the list of prospects and their personal email addresses to Facebook. You'll probably hit about maybe 55, 60% of them. And run ads to them. Make it look organic. Don't have any headlines, no buttons. Just make it look just organically.
Everyone, pause right there, David. Everyone's got to just do that. I was just talking to a couple other people about stuff, and they were talking about ads and this and that. And at a minimum, just start with that. Don't know anything else. Do what David's talking about. Go in, Google how to do it, upload your mail list to create a Facebook audience. Facebook will do all the work for you. It will save it as an audience. Create a simple ad. Start it, run it today. Start it today. Or
and the ad
tomorrow.
And as far as the ad, don't do like, to hire now, book a call, nothing like that. You want to take your best content, like an article or a short piece of content, anything that is authority building. And to give you some examples, when I actually, you know what, I'm going to pull up my Lighthouse Method guide, because I actually have a real deal example.
And David, I have a hard stop in 5 minutes.
Same.
Oh, okay.
But these are some really great examples. People might actually start watching our show more often based on some of this stuff.
Yes, well, that's the plan. This shows we want really great content for everyone, and
this is great takeaways.
I'm
writing this down too. I didn't know about the Facebook email list thing. I'm like,
listen, that's a no-brainer. I've been this, and we could talk more about that on other shows if people want to. There's so many easy things to do, and you're not going to pay for them. And you can do little quick videos you can get. It's going to scroll, and until they click on it, your audience will see you nonstop. You can spend so little money, and the only people ever going to do it are your list. So,
Well, I'll show you a real example here too, and we can go into this more. I think next show we're going to do, I think, hiring, but we can do this on one of the shows coming up here very soon, is Facebook. So this is my Lighthouse Method guide, and I think it's on page 61. I ran this back when I was recruiting in the SAP space. I did this maybe 4 years ago. Over the course of 3 months, I ran about maybe 10 or 12 different ads on Facebook. I uploaded the email addresses for SAP hiring authorities in North America. And I had an audience of about 4,000 people, roughly, right? These are all decision makers, most of them. Over the course of that maybe 3-month period, on average, they saw 12 ads per, and they were all different. They didn't look like ads. They were all articles, little pieces of content. And of that, 22% interacted, meaning they either liked it or they clicked the little see more button so they could read the rest of it. So during that time, that's as if I had 22% of 4,000. So if I had 1,000 people listening to all my voice, like if you combine this with your outbound prospecting campaigns, all you're doing is it's like in the army, right? You're seeding the battlefield. Basically, you're softening the battlefield, right? You're doing the artillery on the battlefield before you actually go in with your troops, right? Your troops being your prospecting campagins.
David,
right?
How do they buy this? How do they get this again?
The Lighthouse Method, they can go to this. Bear with me here. I'm going to pull up the.
It's really great stuff, everyone. As you can see, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, go.
Invest in it.
Yeah, go to realdsp.me/guide.
Is this a free one, this guide, or is it a paid one?
It's free. Oh yeah, It is free.
Well, I thought you had to get this as part of one of your paid boot camps.
No, that's completely free. Now, I will say if they want to buy, I do have a course coming out on Monday called the AI Blueprint Persona. I won't go into details here. Just go to realdsp.me/blueprint. And that'll take you down there at the bottom.
Check that out. Send me a little blurb ad, whatever you have, for your download method, I want to put it on our email trail sequence for people immediately. And I want to put a blurb. I want to send people when they register with us and let them know for recruiters to get that resource, have them opt in on your page and stuff. So send me that. I love it. It's so good. I don't know. I never thought of it. I thought it was paid. I want to get that to all my people all the time. So I'll refer them to insights. Get me something today. Get it out.
Get you today.
Yeah.
And that's it. I guess we got to wrap the show up. I just realized, look at the time. It's almost 2. And this
great show, David.
Well, so, next week we're actually going to be talking, and this actually is an idea that Chris had. So he's not just a pretty face. It's not just a pretty face.
One idea. Once in a while.
He is very handsome.
He suggests next week we can talk about hiring. So for those recruiters who are they're already firm owners, or maybe you're independent, you want to hire your first person to be a VA or a recruiter or a sourcer or even a full desk recruiter. So the best practices around how, right? Because that's huge for a lot of independent recruiters and solos. They want to start building a firm. It's really, 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 really hard to hire someone who's good and who's going to stick. So we'll talk about that next week. All right. Well, I guess that's about it. Anybody want to add anything before we wrap?
No. What's old is new again, as far as the stuff we talked about today, and some really great tips, some really actionable tips. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in for this one. Again, if you're watching the replay, type in a replay. If you haven't watched it live right now, type in live just so you can see who is listening. Thank you, Tommy said. I think it's been great. Thank you all. Excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I think Peter had a good comment as well. Jennifer, fantastic, guys. Great show. See you all next week. Peace out, everybody.
Peace out. Bye, all.